office and shut the door and said, I gave you a direct order and you ignored it, which means you think you're smarter than the person who signs your checks. I looked him in the eye and said, Glenn, the guy lost his wife and he's living out of his truck. I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm handling it on my own time. Glenn pointed his finger in my face and said, people like that are where they are for a reason. And the sooner you figure that out, the sooner you'll stop being such a pushover. He docked my pay and put me on probation and told me one more incident would be my last. I went home that night and sat down across from Nadine at the kitchen table and told her everything. And she listened to all of it and then said, I support what you're doing, but we have bills. And if you lose this job, I don't know what we do. I grabbed her hand and said, it's handled, I promise. She looked at me like she wanted to believe me, but couldn't quite get there. But then Walt showed up the following Monday with a flat tire and no spare, and he was parked right in front of the shop in plain view of everyone, including Glenn. I looked at Glenn through the glass, and I looked at Walt, standing next to his truck, with his shoulders hunched like he already knew he was causing me trouble. And I thought about just telling him to go somewhere else, and that I couldn't help him this time. But Walt looked at me with these eyes that had absolutely nothing left in them, and I couldn't do it. So I walked outside and started helping him. Glenn came out before I'd even finished and said, put your tools down right now. I stood up, and he got close enough that I could feel his breath. He said loud enough for Walt and every customer in the lot to hear, you're done, get your tools, and get out, and take your little project with you. Walt stepped forward and started to say something, and Glenn spun on him and said, you smell like a dumpster, and you're costing me an employee, so do us all a favor and drive that piece of garbage somewhere else before I call someone to remove it. I grabbed my toolbox and walked to my car without saying a word, because if I opened my mouth, I was going to say something I couldn't take back. Walt followed me across the lot looking like he'd just watched someone die and said, I'm so sorry, I never meant for any of this to happen. I told him it wasn't his fault, and he grabbed my arm and looked me dead in the eyes and said, I'm going to pay you back for everything. I promise you that, just give me some time. I said, don't worry about it, Walt, just take care of yourself. And I drove home and sat in my driveway for 20 minutes before I could go inside and face Nadine. She knew the second she saw my face. She didn't yell and she didn't cry, and somehow that was worse because she just looked at me with this hollow expression and said, what are we going to do? I told her I'd find another job and that everything would be fine, and she walked into the bedroom and closed the door. The next few weeks were the worst of my life. I applied to every shop in a 30-mile radius, and Glenn had already called every single one of them and told them I was a liability who couldn't follow basic instructions. Nadine went from silent to angry, and one night she sat me down and she said, I love you, but I can't watch you destroy our life because you feel sorry for a stranger, and if something doesn't change soon, I'm going to stay with my sister until it does. I started picking up odd jobs through an app, fixing things around people's houses and assembling furniture for $40 a pop while our savings dropped towards zero. Every single night, I checked my phone hoping to see a call from Walt, or even just a text saying he hadn't forgotten. But his number went straight to voicemail every time, and the truck never appeared again. After 6 weeks of nothing, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall and finally admitted to myself what everyone had been telling me from the beginning. Glenn was right that I was a pushover, and Nadine was right that I destroyed our life for a stranger. The only person in this whole situation who'd been wrong about anything was me. I'd lost my job and nearly lost my wife because I thought being kind to someone would matter.